Welcome to Now Be You, a podcast and global community for ambitious female entrepreneurs. Here we discuss the ways we can empower you to meet us at the intersection of wellness and daily business practices. I'm your host, Leonora, a psychologist, meditation guide, author, entrepreneur, and mentor with over a decade of experience helping thousands of women unlock their full potential. Welcome to Now Be You, the podcast where we dive deep with game changers who are rewriting the rules. Today, I'm deeply honored to meet Paul Dunn, who is the co-founder of B1G1, Business for Good, a global initiative that helps businesses integrate impactful giving into their operations. Since its inception in 2007, B1G1 has enabled over 3,000 businesses worldwide to create more than 200 million giving impacts, transforming the way businesses contribute to society. A four-time TEDx speaker and renowned social entrepreneur, Paul's mission is to inspire businesses to drive meaningful change through purpose-driven practices. Get ready to discover how purpose, generosity, and innovation can redefine success, not just in business, but in life. This conversation might just shift your perspective forever. So, let's jump in. So, welcome everyone on our beautiful platform where we're gonna dive deep into the oceans of unknown.
There you go. Sounds exciting. I'm thrilled to be here.
And we are welcoming today our guest, Paul Dunn.
Thank you. It's so lovely to be here.
Such a bright mind, wonderful heart, and an initiative in so many businesses, philanthropy, co-creating and connecting people from all over the world. So I would like to give a word for you and ask you the first question. Why are you doing what are you doing?
Well, okay, now before I answer that, can I just do one other thing, right? Because I just want to say thank you, not just to you and everybody who's producing this wonderful thing, but also to the listeners, wherever they are in the world right now, right? Hopefully you've stopped what you're doing and you're about to listen, not necessarily from me, but from this conversation, some ideas that may actually answer that question for you. Like, what is it? Why is it that we do what we do? And the reality is that when we get an understanding of why it is, it sort of supplants everything. We've all of a sudden we have a reason to get up. We have a reason to do something, as opposed to. And by the way, typically that reason, I think, is not necessarily about you. It's about how can we, through whatever it is we do, how can we seriously make a difference? Not necessarily to the entire world, although that's what we try to do, but how can we, like, for example, how on this podcast my thought right now is how can you and I make a difference to the people who are listening? So, and I think frequently what needs to happen, or frequently what people do, and you've probably experienced some people who do this, they say, I need to find my purpose, right? And, you know, they go off and they study their navel for a while. I like what Harvard Business Review said about 3 months ago. They said, you don't find your purpose, you create it. And I think that's really interesting because in order to do that, you have to look outside. Does that make sense? You have to look outside. And the moment you look outside, then you start thinking differently because you realize, and here's a really important thing, you realize that and this is sad in some ways for some people, you realize that it's not about you. You realize that it's not about you. It's about something bigger than you. And I think there's one thought that Steve Jobs had way back in 1994, and when he was at Pixar, and he said this, and so listen up everybody, take some notes if you want to. He said this, he said, the storyteller. Now, before I continue with that sentence, you might say, oh, Paul's going to give us some stuff about how we tell stories. No. Stay tuned. So he said, the storyteller is the most powerful person in the world. Now, ignore the power. Just ignore the power thing on that. Because then he went on to say this, the storyteller, which, by the way, is you. I just want you to think about that for a minute before I complete the sentence. I know this is confusing, but stay with it. So, because you're not, see, Jobs was a great storyteller, but what he also was is what we can be, and that is story creators for the people that we feel privileged to serve. So let me give you the quote from Mr. Jobs. He said, the storyteller sets the vision, the values, and the agenda for an entire generation yet to come. And if you think about those last few words, for an entire generation yet to come, you suddenly get, oh my gosh, this is not about me. Right? This is about something bigger than me, and then you start thinking quite differently. Instead of thinking in a position of like leadership, you get a different sense of it, and the sense that you get is a sense of stewardship. And there's a difference between those two, because in order to be in a sort of stewardship, think Yoda. Right, yeah. Position, yeah. Then there's one thing that you have to let go of in order to do that, and the one thing you have to let go of is ego. Right?
Absolutely.
Because, and if you think about legacy, you really have to let go of it, because you're not going to be around to see it anyway, right? You're not. But then you can think about legacy in an interesting way, and I love, playing is the wrong word, but I love the power of words, right? That's why things like this are so important. And one of the things we can do with words is we can alliterate. So let me just practice some alliteration for you. So alliteration, by the way, you probably know, is where you have words that start with the same letter and they kind of combine in an interesting way. So when you think about legacy, oh, and by the way, when you think about legacy, here's something interesting. You don't have a choice. You think, you have a choice as to whether or not you leave one. No, you don't. You are going to leave one. Right? The question is, what does it look like? Is it one of consumption, or is it one of contribution? So, and I'm not sure whether this is an age thing, but when you get my age, you start to think about leaving it. But what if, instead of thinking about leaving it, like, so when you think about leaving it, it's kind of like down there somewhere. But let's see if we can alliterate. And so instead of leaving it, why don't we think about living it? And the moment we think about living it, then we're doing it every day, right? We're living it every single second of every day. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing we can think about, playing with alliteration, is another L word. So instead of leaving it, we've now got living it, but then we can think about leveraging it. And so in other words, we become, just by what we're doing, not because we're seeking it, not because there's any ego in it, but just by doing what we're doing, other people might be looking in and go, whoa, look at that. That's kind of interesting, that's going on. Maybe I want to be a part of this. And that's why this, a podcast like this is so important, because it gives everybody who's listening, and again, thank you for listening. It gives everybody who's listening this moment to go, ha! Right, and it's those moments that are so important, right? And if we can just quote unquote engineer things, I think that's probably the wrong word. But if we can just let go enough, so that we're experiencing what's there in the moments, and sometimes the challenges of those moments, and sometimes it gets pretty rough. It can get rough, right? And I was in London. Can I tell you about my experience in London?
Please,
yeah, okay.
Please.
So I was in London, and I'm with this group of people, and it's a pretty interesting group. I'm sitting next to Elon Musk's business partner, for example, and I'm sitting next to Sir David Attenborough's producer. It's like, oh my God, I'm like an imposter, right, in this room. Anyway, so they start with this musical thing, and there's brilliant music, and you feel like you're at the center of the universe. And then there was a lady at the back of the stage, and she's black, and she's wearing these flowing white robes, and she comes to the microphone, and I think she's going to do some sort of Tina Turner thing, but she's not. She's a poet. She's a poet, and her name is Sophia Thornton, and she says this. It was like the third line, and she said this, because the reason this is important, by the way, is that I don't know, whoever it was that designed all of this did not design it to be necessarily smooth, right? So there are these interesting little things that happen. She said this. She said, have you ever noticed, and I'll try and do it at the pace she said it. She said, have you ever noticed when things break, they open? And you say, you go, huh? What? And that's such a cool thing. And so the moment you get that, you see everything that happens within that frame. So in a weird way, it's all of these moments, right, that we experience that allow us to build other things, because when they break, they open. And by the way, what's interesting is when they break, you really can't put them back together the same way. You really can't, because that's why they broke in the first place. Although if you're Japanese, you can. If you're Japanese, no, you can. You can, right? The Kingsui thing, right? Where the Japanese potters, they look at pottery, and if something breaks, right, it falls off the thing, they don't go, oh, God. What they do is they regard that as the history of the piece, exactly. Right? And what they do, exactly, and then they put it back together. But this time, as they put it back together, as you know, they put gold in the cracks, right? So it just becomes more valuable, which is another way of expressing that, you know, when things break there, it's actually valuable that they do, because the learning experiences and the opportunity that gives us to think in very different ways, and to get off thinking about ourselves and think about, you know, things that, as I said before, are so much bigger than us. And that's really game-changing for us to do. It's
really a game changer. And I love that perspective that you're sharing with us, Paul, today, about like being creator and actor at the same time.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it?
It's so much more space in our lives.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so, and exactly, but what a lot of people do, of course, is, and I was thinking last night, if you listen to some of the songs, and there are some beautiful songs, right, that we all listen to, you know, things like Imagine and stuff like that. But if you listen to a lot of other songs, they're actually about people playing the victim. If do you know what I'm saying? They really are. They're always sad, right? They're beautiful songs, but maybe they're not setting us up for the right thing. That we are actually in control of all this, and that we can create better outcomes, right? Always, rather than necessarily. And by the way, not just. Well, here's the thing. We might think about creating better outcomes for us. We might think about it that way. But what if we think about it in a different way, and we start thinking, how can I create better outcomes for the people that I'm privileged to serve? And the moment that you think that, boom, it just changes everything. And so you become, you become what Mr. Jobs refers to as a storyteller, creating stories for the people that you're privileged to serve. Yeah.
So what was the story in your life that you basically created that story through yourself that you're privileged to serve?
Well, I'm not sure there's one story. I think there's all these moments. You know, there's the story.
Maybe there is some key moment.
There was a key moment. I mean, when I met with Masami, if you would have said to me before I met with Masami, if you would have said to me, and people ask me this, they would say, so what's the secret of creating a wonderful business, right? And I would say, well, there are only two things back then, pre-2007. And I would say, first thing is, you've got to add enormous value to the people you're privileged to serve. That's rule number one, if you like. Rule number two is that you need to have fun doing it. That was it. That was my thing, right? But then in 2007, I meet Masami, and she asked me, it's so interesting, here I was in a mentoring position, right? So I'm the guy asking the questions, theoretically. And she said to me in this wonderful Japanese accent, she said, can we do different today? And I say, what's different? She says, I want to ask you a question today. So she asked me this question, and she said, what if, it was a what if question, what if we could create something? And by the way, again, thank you for listening, but now listen up to this one. Listen, I mean, this is like a listen up moment, right? So she said to me, what if we could create something where every time business is done, something great happens in our world. Just think about that. I'll just say it again. What if we could create something where every time business is done, something great happens in our world? And I at the time, 2007, I just sold businesses and, like, wow, it was really cool. But there was this missing element, right? And the missing element, what you're about to discover. So I said, well, help me understand what this thing is. What I actually said to her at that point was, because I was like an Australian bloke at that time. And so I said, like all Australians would say, oh, wow, that was awesome. That's what they would say, right? And she was smart enough to say, I don't think you get it. And I said, help me get it. And she said, well, in my mind, I've called it buy one, give one, right, way back then. And I said, okay, so how's that work? And she said, well, imagine, now, you listening? Just go through this imagination.
Close your eyes.
So yeah, exactly. Well, unless you're driving, and then keep your eyes open, right? So she said, imagine you want to buy a plasma TV, and you go to the electronics store, and she said, in my mind, I've called it buy one, give one. And so she said, imagine you want to buy and then you go to the store. And I said, Masami, what's the business model again? What you got to buy one, get Masami? It's impossible. That's not a good business. I cannot go to an electronics store and buy a plasma TV and they're going to give me another one. I mean, that doesn't work. And she said, well, I said, you don't understand, and maybe you don't. She said, let me help you understand. So she said, just think for a moment. You asked me why a moment ago, why we do things. So just think about why you're wanting that plasma TV. She said, you want bigger pixels, you want brighter pixels, you want more pixels, all of that. So then, and this was the moment, this really was the moment. So then she said, so when you want all those pixels, and I'm nodding. So then she said, so how would it be if when you buy that TV, someone who could not see gets the gift of sight? Gulp, right? And I, at the time, I was surrounded by books, and she said, someone author writes a book, and then a tree gets planted. I also had a cup of coffee at the time, and she said, imagine someone buys a cup of coffee, and a child in need gets access to life-saving. I mean, just think about that. For now, just imagine that for a minute, right? And let's just take the water issue as a case in point. Now, remember, we said this is not about you. Remember that it's about something bigger than you. So let's just take water as a case in point, right? Right now, as we speak, all of the people that measure things say there are 870 million. That's 870 with 6 zeros after it, people who do not have access to that. Right? So just imagine now that by you doing something as simple as, I'd love a cup of coffee, please. Just imagine that as a result of that, so the child or whoever got access to it. And of course, that was the moment, if you like, that B1G1 became, like a movement, because all of a sudden, whenever you talk with someone about that, they kind of get it. Oh yeah, that's so cool. If every time I do this, if I meet with you on Zoom, kids get access to education, or if I do this happens, or if I do that, this happens. And so if you think about that for a minute, I like what Brené Brown said in her first TED Talk. By the way, sitting here at Ney Palad, we don't have TED Talks, we have bed talks, right? Which is what this actually is, right? And by the way, I can't tell you what it's like for me to be here. I mean, this is, and I'll get back to the story in a minute, but what this place is actually about, and it's really lump in your throat thing, what this is actually about, and everywhere I look here, I think of the people that made this, and I think that what they're doing is just we're giving them the opportunity to unlock this amazing potential to do something that's never been done before, right? And that's what each one of us have right now. But anyway, let me get back to the story. So imagine if every time we did something great happened, right? And that's what B1G1 is about. And that's that you asked me earlier on, like, what gets me up every day? And what gets me up every day is the opportunity to say to people, hey, there's something additional now that we can do.
There's a bigger picture.
Exactly, a bigger picture.
And that's, that also perspective that we look at the world and a game of life.
Yeah.
Like today we were talking about problem or potential.
Yeah.
And this is how we can open up for the bigger picture without not expectation or not trying to find out what we are here to do in our lives, but just to find the right angle to look at life.
Exactly.
And here we are with our listeners, and this is the maybe takeaway message for them. What would be your suggestion or guidelines for the people who are like, okay, I need to find something, I need to figure out before I start something. What would be your suggestion for the people
it's kind
to
of
find a bigger picture?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Again, remember what Harvard Business Review. Now we should all sort of go, Harvard Business Review, right? When we say that.
Yeah.
But remember what they said. And what they said was, you don't find it, you create it. Now think about that for a minute. Let's imagine that's true, and I think it is, that in order for you to create it, what do you have to do? And what you don't do, and I was thinking about Brene Brown a moment ago, right? And Brene said this, she said, connection is why we're here. Right? She said, connection gives us meaning and purpose in our life. And so frequently what happens when we go, I need to find my purpose, right? So what happens is we go away, we lock ourselves, we go up on a mountaintop or something, and we try and sort of figure it out, but really we're thinking about ourselves. But what if instead of looking inward, we just look outward, and we go, oh my God, look at that. I think I can actually influence that. I think I could actually influence that. I think I could do something that would change all of that, right? And the moment it gets back to Mr. Jobs, right? That it's really not about us. It's about that whole ability to realize that maybe, Brene Brown said, we're here, but, connection is why we're here. And I think what she was trying to get to is that it's inbuilt into our DNA, and when we lose it, quote unquote, we go and lock ourselves in the cupboard or whatever else it is we do. But it's only when we come out and connect that I think it's very difficult to win something on, if you said, the idea, right? The idea is that we need to win every day. Let's imagine that's the idea, okay? Just imagine that's the game, a new game, winning every day. Then the thing that's very difficult to do is to win that on your own. I mean, you can't. It's crazy. And so when we start to connect with others, and we do that from a sort of genuine service point of view, and when we also are thinking about this whole word potential, and when we're thinking about what's the potential of what we can unlock here, and then we think about that, instead of thinking about that ourselves, we think about that with groups of people, and we respect where they're coming from as well. And then all of a sudden, think about this.
Yeah.
That's it. It's a group of people coming together with some common vision that we can create something absolutely extraordinary. But when we create that, we're unlocking our own potential, and this is really important, that we're unlocking our own potential so that people can actually come here. Think about it this way. People can actually come here. They can sit in this wonderful environment that you and I are sitting in right now and unlock their potential. as a result.
Or whatever it is.
Very cool.
Don't you think it's like there is, I deeply believe and see the patterns in our lives that whatever is within is outside of you. Yeah? So this bigger picture, it's always coming from the completion within yourself.
Yes.
If we start from the lack within ourselves, we're gonna just face
that's what you're gonna attract. Exactly.
The reality.
Yeah, exactly.
So, imagine now one of our listeners or some people are really struggling right now with their own authenticity. What should I do? How can I help the world? How can I help myself? Where should I be? Because we have a lot of distractions to not be ourselves. What would be your...
I would say two things. Can I say two instead of instead of one? Okay.
It would be more helpful.
Well, I think the first thing is, and people think this is weird. I'm really lucky, right, on account of how I live in Singapore, and in Singapore, those of you who don't know, you don't need cars, because the public transport system is just amazing. And outside my condo, for example, the place where I live, there's a bus literally every 42 seconds, right? So when I get on the bus, we have these little cards, you beep, that's the thing. So I get on the bus and I go beep, and then I stop and I look at the bus driver, right? And they have to look at me because in a sense they want me to move on, for the next person. And then the bus driver looks at me and I say to the bus driver, "Thank you for stopping." And
Here we go.
They're blown away, right? And I imagine that when they get home at the end of the day, they might talk to their family and say, something really weird happened today at bus stop 172. This guy got on and said, "Thank you." And by the way, when I get off the bus, I do the same thing. I go around the front and say, "By the way, thank you for that." So I think that's one of them, and it's really challenging when you're sort of in the poo, as it were. It's really challenging to have a look at where you are and be grateful for where you are. What we tend to think about is the gap, right? We're always thinking about the gap, and when we think about the gap between where we are and where we could be, we forget what we've already done. Right? We just forget. We forget it, right? And so the moment you start to remember that, it's really automatic to come from that place of gratitude. And then the second part of the answer is, again, getting back to this whole idea that instead of helping you, see, someone said to me a couple of weeks ago, they said, you need to remember that the power that you have is not the power to come up with the solution. The power is in the questions that you ask, right? That's a really important thing. And so by asking better questions, and one of those questions would be, instead of thinking, how do I, get out of my stuff, right? A much better question is, how can I help others? And the moment you get that, you're going to find, it's weird, right, to say that. I know that sounds weird, and I know that, Paul, you've never been in the poo, you've never been, not true. I've been in lots of it, right? But always that's the way out, even though we think it's not at the time. Always the way out is to be in gratitude, always. And then to think about, how can I best serve others as a result? And when you do that, guess what? It just turns out that that's the best solution, not just for you, but for the others. And I think, again, being here, you think about the people in the Philippines. I mean, this place here that we're in was knocked over by a cyclone, for goodness sake.
Yes.
You could say, oh, it's the end of it. Or you could say, well, what was it that Sphere Thurton said? She said, you ever notice that when things break, they open? And so maybe this time for you, if you're in that space, is in fact a time, again, I know it sounds weird, and I know you think it might be easy to say this, believe me, it's not, but it is just the serious common sense that when you think about it, that it's the only way out. The only way out is to be grateful for where you are, and then to think of, that line. Have you ever noticed that when things break, they open? And then the moment you realize that, you will ask a different question in terms of the solution.
So to wrap it up, it's like, I would like to visualize with one sentence. Imagine you are standing in front of the mirror, and there is something you want to change within about yourself. But you see in the mirror, this is what exactly you were sharing with us.
Exactly.
And you say, I don't like that, what is outside of me.
Yeah, exactly.
why don't I start with myself?
Yeah.
And that's how gonna reflect with the outside. And it's
always.
always connection. And that can be a great inspiration for all of us. Looking outside to see, as you mentioned before, how can I serve? How can I help with that what I'm maybe lacking on wishing, or something is inside of me that is moving me to reflect that on the outside world.
So true, so true. And what's been so nice, by the way, is for you being a mirror right now, and not just for me.
For you
well,
to
yeah,
be
but
a
not just
mirror
for me.
for me.
But all of the people that have been listening. So thank you for making it possible, and for making good things flow as a result of it. So thank you. It's been great.
Thank you, Paul, for always supporting us, for always inspiring us, and for always to be such a great reflection of us.
Oh, it's my privilege.
So have a wonderful day, night, wherever you are, and keep on growing and glowing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Growing and glowing. That sounds like a great idea. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Now Be You podcast. If you liked our conversation, please subscribe the podcast and join our community where much more authentic conversations to come.